The void between stars is not empty. It is a graveyard of light, a silent ocean, where empires rise and fall like tides measured in millennia. And into this ancient, indifferent dark, humanity stumbled late, loud and utterly unprepared. For centuries we dreamed of cosmic kinship. We scanned the heavens with hopeful eyes, broadcasting greetings on radio waves like children calling into a vast, echoing cave. We found silence. Then we found them. The Konthar Collective did not arrive with fanfare or diplomacy. They arrived as a storm arrives, inevitable, total and utterly indifferent to the ants beneath its fury. Their ships, vast obsidian leviathans wreathed in cold plasma, blotted out suns. Their doctrine was simple, brutal, and rooted in eons of galactic dominance. Scour. Any species exhibiting sufficient technological potential to one day threaten the Collective's perfect, sterile order was to be harvested, dissected, and extinguished before it could bloom. Potential was the crime, existence was the sentence. Earth fell in weeks, not with fire and fury, but with chilling efficiency. Orbital kinetic rods, silent and precise, turned cities into craters of fused glass. Atmospheric processors choked the skies with gray ash. Billions perished not in battle but in the suffocating quiet of a world being methodically erased. The Cathar didn't hate humanity. They barely noticed us. We were termites in the foundation of their grand design, annoying, potentially structural, and easily eradicated. But termites, it turned out, could bite. On the scorched plains of what was once Kazakhstan, beneath a sky perpetually stained the color of dried blood, Captain Anya Rostova crouched in the skeletal remains of a pre-collapse fusion plant. The air tasted of ozone and despair. Her breath fogged in the unnatural chill the Cathar atmospheric processors maintained. A constant low-grade winter designed to break spirits as much as bodies. Her fingers, calloused and scarred, traced the cold metal of her scavenged pulse rifle. It felt heavier than it should, or maybe it was just the weight of the last 5 years. Around her, the remnants of Echo Company huddled in the shadows. Faces gaunt, eyes hollowed by loss and relentless fear. Yet burning with a stubborn ember the Cathar couldn't seem to extinguish. They called Earth a death world now, not because of its ruined state, but because of the humans who refused to die quietly within it. The Cathar had learned, to their cold, logical dismay, that Homo sapiens sapiens possessed a terrifying capacity for adaptation, for enduring pain, for turning desperation into a weapon sharper than any plasma cutter. "Movement, Sector Gamma 7, whispered Kale, his voice a rasp barely audible over the wind whistling through shattered ferrocrete. He pointed a trembling finger towards the horizon, where the skeletal silhouette of a Cathar harvester drone glided silently, its multi-jointed legs scanning the ruins with cold photoreceptor eyes. It moved with the unnerving grace of a spider, utterly silent, utterly relentless. Its purpose: locate biomass, process it, feed the Collective's insatiable hunger for raw materials and genetic data. Anya's jaw tightened. Hold position. Silent protocol. Her voice was low, steady, belying the storm inside. She remembered the faces of her squad before the scouring, laughing over ration bars in a sun-drenched mess hall that no longer existed. She remembered the screams as the sky turned black and the world ended. She remembered the first time she'd seen a Cathar up close, its chitinous carapace gleaming under the emergency lights of a ruined subway station, its multiple limbs moving with terrifying, insectile precision as it processed survivors. The memory was a physical ache, a cold knot in her gut. They made us pray, she thought, the familiar mantra hardening into diamond. Now, her gaze drifted to the small, battered data slate, strapped to her wrist. On its cracked screen, a single encrypted symbol pulsed faintly, a stylized sun, fractured but burning. The symbol of Project Icarus. The last desperate gamble whispered in the deepest, darkest bunkers of the Resistance. A myth, a prayer, or a death sentence wrapped in hope. Light years away, aboard the Cathar Command Nexus Silent Edict, Arch-Scourer Vraxik-Thol observed the data streams flowing across his crystalline interface. His form was a nightmare of articulated obsidian plates and sensory stalks, radiating an aura of absolute chilling control. To Vraxik-Thol, humanity was a fascinating anomaly, a statistically insignificant blip that refused to conform to the predictable patterns of extinction. Their resilience was inefficient, illogical, a flaw in the universe's design that the collective existed to correct. Report from Scouring Zone Sol 3, intoned a subordinate drone, its voice a synthesized monotone devoid of inflection. Biomass yield decreased by 12.7% in the last cycle. Resistance activity increased by 8. Anomalous energy signatures detected near former Eurasian industrial zones. Classification: indeterminate. Prescrethal primary photoreceptors narrowed, focusing on the anomalous signature. It was faint, erratic, but persistent, like a dying ember refusing to be snuffed. Illogical persistence, he mused. A biological imperative overriding survival instinct. Or something else. The collective's doctrine was clear: anomalies required deeper analysis, deeper dissection. He gestured with a clawed limb. Deploy additional harvesters to Sector Gamma. Initiate Level 3 bioscanning. Capture specimens exhibiting anomalous resilience parameters. Full neural mapping required. The order was transmitted instantly, a ripple of cold command through the collective's network. On Earth, the harvester drone scanning the ruins of Kazakhstan suddenly altered its trajectory, its photoreceptors locking onto a specific thermal signature emanating from the fusion plant ruins. It began to move with renewed purpose, its silent glide now carrying the promise of capture and vivisection. Back in the ruins, Anya felt the shift in the air. The oppressive silence deepened, became charged. Kale's hand tightened on his rifle. "They know," he breathed, his eyes wide with primal fear. Anya didn't need confirmation. She saw the harvester's path adjust, saw the way its photoreceptors fixed on their hiding place like targeting lasers. Too late for silent protocol. "Scatter," she barked, the command tearing through the fragile quiet. "Alpha pattern, go." Chaos erupted. Figures burst from the shadows, sprinting for prearranged bolt holes through the labyrinth of rubble. Pulse rifles spat searing bolts of energy, useless against the harvester's thick carapace, but buying precious seconds. The drone responded with terrifying speed. A limb lashed out, a barbed tendril whipping through the air, impaling a young soldier named Jax before he could reach cover. He screamed. A raw, animal sound cut horrifyingly short as the tendril retracted, dragging his limp form towards the drone's processing maw. "Jax!" Kale roared, firing wildly, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. Anya didn't look back. Survival was a brutal calculus. She ran, her boots crunching on broken glass and bone, the harvester's heavy, multi-limbed tread shaking the ground behind her. She could feel its cold, alien presence like a physical pressure on her spine. It was herding them. Towards what? A trap? A processing node? She ducked into a collapsed service tunnel, the darkness swallowing her, her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She fumbled for the data slate. The Icarus symbol pulsed brighter now, almost frantic. A proximity alert, or a countdown. Suddenly the tunnel entrance was blocked by the harvester's massive, shadowed form. Its photoreceptors glowed with malevolent red light, pinning her in the gloom. It raised a limb, not a weapon, but a complex array of probes and syringes designed for live capture. The air filled with a high-pitched whine as it prepared to subdue her. Anya raised her pulse rifle, knowing it was futile. She thought of Earth, of the billions lost, of Jax's scream. She thought of the symbol on her wrist. Fury of 10,000 suns. Was this it? Captured? Dissected? Made into data for the monsters who erased her world? The harvester lunged. Anya squeezed the trigger, a final defiant act. The pulse bolt struck the drone's carapace and dissipated harmlessly. The probes descended. Then light. Not from her rifle, from above. A searing, impossible beam of pure white energy, brighter than a newborn star, lanced down from the blood-stained sky. It struck the harvester drone not with an explosion, but with terrifying silence. The obsidian carapace didn't shatter. It unraveled, dissolving into shimmering motes of light that vanished before they hit the ground. The drone simply ceased to exist. Anya stumbled back, shielding her eyes against the blinding radiance. The beam held for a heartbeat, then retracted, vanishing as suddenly as it appeared. Silence rushed back in, thicker and more profound than before. Then ting, Anya lowered her arm. Where the harvester had stood, only scorched earth remained, and etched into the ground, glowing faintly with residual energy, was the symbol from her data slate, the fractured sun. Her comment crackled, a voice she hadn't heard in years, rough with static but burning with fierce, impossible hope. Rostova, get your ass to grid Sigma 9, the Icarus protocol. It's live, and we're done being prey. The cliffhanger wasn't just the rescue. It was the terrifying, exhilarating implication hanging in the irradiated air. What have we awakened? The hidden base beneath the Siberian permafrost, codenamed Forge, hummed with a tension thicker than the recycled air. It wasn't the desperate, gnawing tension of mere survival anymore. It was the coiled spring tension of imminent, catastrophic action. The air smelled of ozone, hot metal, and the sharp tang of human sweat laced with adrenaline and fear. Anya stood before the central holotank, her face illuminated by the swirling star map projected within. At its heart, solar system glowed, Earth a dull, wounded ember. Around it, the Kaufther fleet positions flickered like malignant stars, and converging on them from hidden shipyards buried in the asteroid belt and the dark side of Luna were the symbols representing Project Icarus. Sleek, angular warships, unlike anything humanity had ever built, their designs incorporating salvaged Kaufther tech and human ingenuity pushed to its absolute screaming limit. They were christened Dawnbringer class, a name that felt like a prayer and a threat. Commander Vance, Anya said, her voice tight. The man standing beside her was gaunt, his eyes holding the weight of every soul lost since the scouring began. Silas Vance, the architect of Icarus, the man who'd gambled humanity's last resources on a theory whispered in the ashes. He looked older than his years, etched with lines of grief and relentless pressure. The Dawnbringer fleet is at 87% combat readiness, Vance replied, his voice gravelly but steady. He tapped the holotank, zooming in on Earth. Cathar orbital defenses are concentrated over their primary processing hubs. What's left of Chicago, Shanghai, Berlin, their ground forces are thinning, pulling back to consolidate. They're scared. Anya? They don't understand what just vaporized that harvester. Scared? Anya scoffed, though a cold dread coiled in her stomach. They don't feel fear, Silas. They calculate risk. And we just presented them with an unknown variable they can't quantify. She remembered the harvester dissolving into light, the sheer, terrifying power of it. What is the Icarus drive, Silas? Truly. Vance's gaze flickered away, towards the massive viewport overlooking the main construction bay. Below, workers swarmed over the skeletal frame of the lead Dawnbringer. The Aurora. It's borrowed fire, Anya, he said finally, his voice dropping. We reverse-engineered principles from Cathar energy manipulation, their ability to phase matter, to disintegrate, but we fused it with something uniquely human. Our capacity for focused, sustained rage. Our refusal to yield. The drive doesn't just output energy, it amplifies the collective will of the crew. The more they believe, the more they burn with the need to strike back, the hotter the sun it forges. Anya stared at him. You weaponized hope? Or vengeance? Does it matter? Vance asked, his eyes meeting hers, bleak and resolute. It's the only fire hot enough to melt their obsidian hearts. Operation Scourgebreaker launches in 48 hours. We hit their orbital command nexus, silent edict with everything we have. We shatter their command structure, then rain fire on their ground hubs. We give Earth back its sky. The plan was audacious, suicidal, glorious. Anya felt the old ember in her chest flare into a furnace. Fury of 10,000 suns. It wasn't just a name, it was a promise. Aboard the silent edict, Ark Skarevirik Sitzel absorbed the report of the harvester's annihilation, not destroyed, unmade. The data was disturbing, illogical. The energy signature defied known physics, exhibiting properties both entropic and coherent. It resonated with a chaotic emotional frequency the collective sensors struggled to parse. Biological resonance? Impossible. Energy was energy. Order was order. Analysis inconclusive, droned the science overseer, its sensory stalks quivering with agitation. The signature exhibits intent, a directed will. This violates fundamental thermodynamic principles. Intent is a biological flaw, Virax stated, his voice colder than the void outside. It is inefficiency, noise. Yet, the anomaly persisted, and anomalies, left unchecked, bred chaos. Chaos threatened the collective's perfect order. Increase surveillance. Deploy the Reaper battle group to Sol's system. Scour the source of this aberration, utterly. He accessed the collective's vast memory banks, pulling up fragmented data from early human encounters. Images of primitive settlements resisting orbital strikes with crude explosives, footage of soldiers fighting with broken bones and empty weapons, recordings of defiant broadcasts, choked with static but burning with irrational conviction. Illogical persistence, illogical sacrifice, illogical fury. The word felt alien on his conceptual processors. Fury implied passion. Passion implied loss of control. Control was the bedrock of the collective. A flicker of something akin to unease, a cold static in his logical pathways, registered. This anomaly wasn't just a weapon, it was a symptom of a disease the collective had never encountered. A species whose very biology seemed wired for defiance in the face of absolute annihilation. A Deathworlder not just in environment, but in spirit. The launch of Operation Scourgebreaker was a silent ballet of desperation and fury. Dawnbringer-class ships, cloaked in stolen Kadar phase-shifting fields, slipped through the asteroid belt like ghosts. Inside the Aurora's command bridge, Anya stood beside Vance, now acting as fleet coordinator. The air crackled with suppressed energy. Crew members moved with grim efficiency, their faces set, eyes fixed on their consoles. The Icarus drive hummed in the ship's core, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated in the bones, feeding on the collective tension, the shared memory of loss, the burning need for retribution. Approaching Cathar perimeter, Vance announced, his voice calm despite the tension radiating from him. Activating Icarus drive. Full resonance. A low groan built within the ship, rising in pitch and intensity. The lights on the bridge flickered, then stabilized, glowing with an unnaturally bright, white-hot luminescence. Anya felt it, a surge of raw power not just in the ship but through her. It was like touching a live wire of pure, focused rage and hope. The fractured sun symbol on her wrist flared, burning hot against her skin. "Drive at 100%, the engineering chief reported, his voice strained. "Resonance stable. For now." "Engage," Anya ordered, her voice cutting through the thrum. The Aurora and its sister ships dropped their cloaks. Space around them warped, not with the smooth distortion of a jump drive, but with a violent, sun-bright tearing. 10,000 points of incandescent light erupted from the fleet, lancing towards the unsuspecting Cathar orbital defenses surrounding Earth. Chaos erupted. Cathar point defense lasers lashed out, but the Icarus beams phased through them, striking capital ships with devastating effect. Obsidian hulls didn't explode, they unraveled, dissolving into clouds of shimmering particles that scattered like cosmic dust. The silent efficiency of the Cathar fleet was shattered by the raw, screaming fury of humanity's counterstrike. On the bridge of the Silent Edict, Vrax Full watched his fleet dissolve. Alarms blared, a sound rarely heard on a Cassifer command vessel. Impossible. The science overseer shrieked. Their energy output defies conservation laws. It is fueled by emotion. Emotion is irrelevant. Farvax Dulrolls roared, a rare display of agitation fracturing his usual icy control. Focus fire. Deploy the Reaper. The massive Cathar dreadnought Reaper detached from the Silent Edict, its weapons powering up with a deep, ominous thrum. It targeted the Aurora, the source of the most intense anomalous signature. "Reaper locking on," Vance yelled. "Evasive maneuvers. All batteries concentrate fire on the Reaper." The Aurora shuddered as near misses from the Reaper's heavy plasma cannons rocked it. The Icarus beams lanced out, striking the dreadnought's shields. They held, flickering violently but holding. The Reaper was built for this, a fortress designed to withstand stellar flares. Drive resonance spiking, the engineering chief screamed. Crew biosigns, fluctuating, it's feeding on their stress, on their fear. Anya saw it on the faces around her. The initial surge of triumph was fading, replaced by the dawning horror of the Reaper's resilience and the sheer, overwhelming power it represented. The Icarus drive wasn't just amplifying their fury, it was amplifying everything. Their terror, their doubt, and the drive was starting to burn them from the inside out. "Vance," Anya shouted over the din. "We can't hold this. The drive is consuming us." Vance's face was ashen, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at the holodisplay, at the Reaper bearing down, at the dissolving remnants of the Qatar fleet, at the wounded Earth below. His eyes held a terrible knowledge. "It was always the cost, Anya," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the ship's groaning. "The fire needs fuel. Our fire needs—" Before Anya could react, Vance slammed his fist onto his console. Emergency overrides flashed, transferring all Icarus drive control to my neural link, diverting life support and auxiliary power to the core. Brace for maximum output. "No!" Anya lunged for him, but it was too late. Vance's body went rigid, his eyes wide with pain and fierce determination locked onto Anya's. "Tell them we gave them back their sky," he gasped. Then light, pure, blinding, white-hot light, erupted from his console, engulfing him. His biosigns flatlined instantly. The Aurora screamed. The Icarus drive flared with the intensity of a supernova contained within a bottle. The beam that lanced out wasn't just energy. It was the distilled essence of Silas Vance's sacrifice, his final act of defiance, his love for a lost Earth. It struck the Reaper's shields. For a moment nothing happened. The shields held, glowing an angry red. Then, they shattered. The beam pierced the dreadnought's obsidian hull, not dissolving it but igniting it from within. The Reaper didn't vanish. It detonated in a silent, sun-bright fireball that momentarily outshone Sol itself, bathing the ruined Earth in an eerie, cleansing light. Silence fell on the Aurora's bridge, broken only by the ragged breathing of the survivors and the dying hum of the overloaded Icarus drive. Anya stared at the empty space where Vance had stood, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. Victor with the life of the man who gave them the weapon. Then the comms officer's voice, trembling with horror, cut through the grief. "Captain, incoming transmission. Priority Alpha. From the silent edict." The main view screen flickered, resolving not into Vraxthal's chilling visage, but into a grainy, decades-old video feed. It showed a young Silas Vance, decades before the Scouring, standing on a lush, green Earth. He was holding the hand of a little girl with bright eyes and Vance's smile. They were laughing, pointing at something off-screen. The sun was warm, the sky impossibly blue. The transmission cut to text, scrolling slowly, coldly in perfect unaccented English. Archive recovered. Silas Vance personal logs. Subject: daughter, Lily Vance. Terminated during initial scouring of Sol 3 Sector Gamma 7. Cause: kinetic rod impact. Biological sample retrieved for analysis. The screen went dark. Anya's blood turned to ice. The revelation wasn't just devastating. It was a cosmic betrayal. Vance hadn't just built a weapon of vengeance. He'd built a weapon fueled by his own unimaginable grief. All along he'd known his daughter was gone, processed like biomass, her very essence perhaps analyzed by the monsters he sought to destroy. His sacrifice wasn't just for Earth. It was a final, furious scream into the void for his lost child. And the Qatar. They hadn't just killed her. They'd catalogued her. Made her data. The ultimate insult to the ultimate loss. The silence on the bridge was absolute, heavier than the void outside. The victory felt like ashes. The fury remained, but now it was laced with a grief so profound it threatened to extinguish the fire itself. Anya looked at the view screen, now reflecting the hollow eyes of her crew, and knew the war had just become infinitely more personal, infinitely more terrible. The silence after Vance's sacrifice wasn't peace. It was the calm before the true storm. The Kethar, reeling from the loss of the Reaper and the silent edict's near miss, didn't retreat. They adapted Scour's Rakthul, his logical pathways scarred by the irrationality of human sacrifice, issued a new directive, total eradication protocol. No more harvesting, no more analysis. Only they would glass Earth from orbit, reduce it to molten slag, and scour the solar system clean of the human anomaly. Permanently. The Dawnbringer fleet, battered and grieving, regrouped in the shadow of Jupiter. The Icarus drives were damaged, their resonance unstable. The cost of Vance's final act had been immense. But the fire hadn't gone out. It had banked, deep in the bellies of the surviving crews, fed now not just by vengeance but by the crushing weight of Vance's revelation and the Kethar's cold, catalogued cruelty. They knew what they were fighting for, not just survival, but the right to mourn, the right to remember their dead as people, not data points. Anya stood on the bridge of the Aurora, now her command. Vance's empty station was a raw wound. She'd watched the recovered footage of Lily Vance 100 times. The laughter, the sunlight, the utter normalcy of a life stolen before it truly began. It wasn't just Vance's pain, it was humanity's pain magnified a billionfold. The Cathar hadn't just attacked their world. They'd violated the sanctity of their grief. Cathar fleet is massing, Kale reported, his voice rough but steady. He'd found a grim resolve after Jax's death, channeling his rage into cold efficiency. They're forming a kill web around Earth, orbital bombardment platforms powering up. Anya studied the holotank. The Cathar formation was a masterpiece of cold logic, overlapping fields of fire, redundant command nodes, impenetrable shields, a perfect machine of annihilation. They think they've calculated us, she said, her voice low and dangerous. They think our fire is spent, they think grief makes us weak. She turned to her crew, her eyes sweeping over the faces etched with exhaustion and loss, but burning with that same unquenchable ember. They're wrong. Grief isn't weakness, it's fuel. Vance showed us that. Lily showed us what we're fighting for. Not just a planet, people, memories, laughter in the sun. She slammed her fist on the console, the fractured sun symbol on her wrist flaring. We don't just strike back, we burn them out of our sky. We make them remember the cost of making us prey. A roar went up from the bridge. Roar and primal. The Icarus drive hummed in response. A deep resonant thrum that vibrated through the deck plates, feeding on the collective surge of righteous fury and sorrow. Aboard the Silent Edict, Rzexthalad monitored the human fleet's movements. Their energy signatures were erratic, unstable, yet intensifying. The emotional resonance was off the charts, a chaotic storm of grief, rage, and something else, purpose. It defied analysis. It defied logic. Their tactics are illogical, the science overseer stated, its stalks trembling. They are consignate their damaged fleet for a direct assault on our primary bombardment platform. It is suicide. They cannot win. Suicide is inefficient, Vraxthal countered, but doubt that insidious static crackled in his processors. Yet, they persist. Why? What drives this fury? He accessed the recovered Vance logs again. The image of the laughing child. The Cathar had processed the data, categorized the emotional response as irrational attachment, a biological inefficiency. But seeing it now in the context of the human suicidal charge, was it inefficiency, or was it a different kind of strength? A strength the collective in its sterile perfection had never understood. The thought was heresy, dangerous. Yet, it persisted. Deploy all reserves, Vraxthul ordered, his voice colder than ever, trying to crush the doubt, annihilate them. Erase this anomaly from existence. The final battle wasn't fought in the cold vacuum, with silent beams. It was a maelstrom of light and sound and raw, screaming defiance. The Dawnbringer fleet, led by the scarred Aurora, plunged into the heart of the Cathar killweb. Icarus beams, unstable but terrifyingly bright, lanced out, not just dissolving ships, but shattering them with the force of contained supernovae. Cathar plasma fire filled the void, turning space into a hellscape of incandescent death. The Aurora took hit after hit. Hull plates buckled. Atmosphere hissed into space. casualties mounted. But the crew fought on, their movements fueled by the memory of Vance, of Lily, of Jax, of billions lost. The Icarus drive screamed, its resonance feeding on their pain, their fury, their desperate love for a world they might never see whole again. The light within the ship grew painfully bright, searing. Drive core critical. The engineering chief yelled, his face illuminated by the hellish glow. Resonance feedback. It's going to blow. Anya stood at the helm, her hands gripping the controls, her eyes fixed on the primary Cathar bombardment platform, a monstrous structure bristling with planet-cracking weapons aimed directly at the fragile blue marble of Earth below. Not yet, she growled. Not until we're inside their shield perimeter.
Kale, plot a collision course.
Maximum burn. Anya, that's Kale began, horrified. It's the only way. She cut him off, her voice raw. Vance gave us the fire, now we become the fire. For Earth, for Lily, for everyone they took. The Aurora, trailing fire and debris, a dying comet of human defiance, accelerated towards the bombardment platform. Cathar point defense batteries tore into it, but the ship held together by sheer will and the screaming Icarus drive. They breached the outer shield layer. On the silent edict, Vraksthot watched the human flagship's suicidal trajectory. The emotional resonance emanating from it was a physical pressure on his sensors, a wave of pure distilled grief and fury that made his logical pathways stutter. He saw the image of the laughing child superimposed over the burning ship, illogical, inefficient, fatal, yet magnificent. The thought was a spark in the sterile darkness of his mind, a spark of something terrifyingly new. Brace for impact. Anya screamed over the ship-wide comm, her voice echoing with the roar of the overloaded drive. She thought of the green fields of her childhood, now ash. She thought of Vance's final pain-filled eyes. She thought of Lily's smile. She poured every ounce of her being, every memory, every tear, every scream of rage into the Icarus core. For Earth, the Aurora struck the bombardment platform not with a crash, but with a silent, sun-bright detonation. The Icarus drive, pushed beyond its limits by the collective will of its crew and Anya's final all-consuming sacrifice, didn't just explode. It unleashed. The energy released wasn't merely destructive. It was transformative. A wave of pure white-hot creation and annihilation. The fury of 10,000 suns given form erupted from the point of impact. It didn't just destroy the bombardment platform, it unraveled it, and the wave expanded, washing over the Cathar fleet. Obsidian hulls didn't melt, they sublimated into shimmering stardust. Shields didn't fail. They dissolved like mist in sunlight. The wave expanded, a silent expanding sphere of impossible light, reaching out towards the silent edict. Thax, Phil stood on his command deck, bathed in the blinding radiance. His sensors screamed warnings of total system failure. His logical mind fractured under the onslaught of the emotional resonance, the grief, the love, the fury that was the true weapon. He saw not just data but meaning. He saw the cost of the scouring, not as a necessary efficiency, but as a cosmic tragedy. The sterile perfection of the collective suddenly felt hollow, empty, dead. As the wave of light reached the silent edict, Thul didn't order evasive maneuvers. He simply watched, and in his final moments, as his form began to unravel into the same shimmering particles as his fleet, a single alien thought echoed in his dissolving consciousness. A concept the collective had never named, but which humanity knew all too well: regret. Silence returned to the Sol system. A different silence, not the silence of the grave, but the silence after a storm. The Cathar fleet was gone. Not destroyed, unmade. Reduced to a slowly expanding cloud of harmless, glittering particles that caught the light of the distant sun. Earth hung in the void, scarred, wounded, its atmosphere still stained, its surface a patchwork ruin and fragile green shoots pushing through the ash. But the sky was clearing. The oppressive gray veil was thinning, allowing the first true, unfiltered sunlight in 5 years to touch the broken continents. On the surface, in the ruins of Kazakhstan, survivors crawled from bunkers and rubble. They looked up, shielding their eyes against the unfamiliar, gentle warmth. Tears streamed down faces weathered by years of despair. They didn't cheer. Not yet. The cost was too fresh, too vast. But they breathed air that didn't taste of ash. They felt the sun, high above. In the debris field where the Aurora and the Canthar Armada had been, a single small escape pod tumbled slowly. Inside, Kale, the only survivor of the Aurora's bridge crew, clung to consciousness. He'd been thrown clear in the final moments by a bulkhead explosion. On the pod's small view screen, Earth filled the frame, bathed in the golden light of dawn. He activated the comm, his voice weak but clear, carrying on the open channel. "This is Kale of the UNS Aurora," he rasped, his eyes fixed on the healing world below. "Scourgebreaker is complete. The sky is ours again." He fell silent, watching the sunlight glint off the oceans, the first hints of green on the continents. The cost was written in the emptiness beside him, in the faces of billions lost, in the ghost of a little girl's laugh. But the fire hadn't died. It had burned away the darkness. It had bought them this dawn. The pod drifted, a tiny speck of life in the vast, silent ocean of stars. Below, on the wounded but living Earth, the first bird song in 5 years echoed tentatively through a ruined city, a fragile, beautiful sound against the backdrop of cosmic silence. The war was over. The healing, the remembering, the living, that was just beginning. And humanity, the Deathworlders who refused to be prey, would face it with the hard-won light of 10,000 suns burning in their hearts.